Hello, we are here with our first Shoebox Conversation. Pam Douglas is joining us from her home studio in Santa Monica. And then we have Sheli Silverio, part of our Shoebox team, and Sam, or S. Vollie Osborn, who's showing us his profile picture. We had decided to start these conversations because we want to tell our artist stories, talk about what they're doing in the studio, talk about their art practice in general, any exhibitions that they have coming up, even exhibitions that have maybe been canceled or postponed, and what they're doing about that. And so, yeah, it's all about, telling the story and kind of being inspiring and, talking about that we're all still trying to work and do the best that we can today and right now. So Pam, we kind of wanted to start off, tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you doing to keep busy during the day? Are you working still? Tell us what's going on right now.
I am so involved in my Sanctuary series that I have the fortune of being completely focused. And that helps tremendously in this time when people feel like, the days no longer have names or numbers. Everything is this day, that day, the other day, and oh gosh, it's the same day. And it shapes my time to know that I have a project that I care about and that has actual steps and there's things, substantial physical things to do every day on it, even if it's as small as wrapping twine around a stick. That's a task that is able to take your energy and put it in a place, and it fends off some of the pressures of the world. Doesn't mean I'm immune to them at all, but that's kind of my day. Am I still working? Yeah, I have the final dregs of my school semester, but like all schools I teach, the classes have been closed. So the campus is locked down. My plants in my office are dying.
Oh.
It makes me feel very bad. I wasn't able to get in the building to save them, and I hear them.
Yeah.
But anyway, and all my materials are also locked up. And so I had to teach on, I am currently having to teach on Zoom, just winging it every week. It's surprisingly not so bad, actually. I don't have to drive and park. That's good.
Yeah.
And it actually leaves me with more time for my art. So I'm not all sorry about that, actually. It's tough though. I mean, I see you guys here now, and Kristine's been doing such a good job of bringing people together periodically that, the loneliness of isolation is really mitigated by the groups, communities meeting. In addition to this community, I'm in a couple of others that also are Zooming. So it's not so bad for me as it is for some other people who have really nothing to do. I think it must be very hard if you're, by yourself. You don't have work you care about. You don't have people you're associated with. And all you've got are the four walls. And that must be very tough.
Definitely. I've joined, a couple of happy hour groups. So people are Zooming, which I think that's going to be the word of 2020 is like Zoom. Yeah. Let's Zoom. Are you going to Zoom? We're Zooming. But it's great for keeping people connected, So I think, I hope a lot of people are able to do that, connect with whatever community they're in, through Zoom. And I hear it a lot for sure.
I think groups that hadn't quite coalesced before are forming now because of the need. I see a real upside to this pandemic in the way it's going to shape our values. What really finally matters. I mean, does it really matter that you had to go to a store and buy that thing or, go to that opening? Maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I know we've talked, over the last month or two about like your upcoming exhibitions. You had Sanctuary One that was previously at Tag Gallery. It is going to be, no, it was moved to January of 2021 now, right? You're at Los Angeles Art Association, or
Yeah, I had my solo show at 8 Gallery 825, LAAA, was scheduled for the exact week that the world shut down.
yeah,
And no, it was that very week we were getting ready to install, and Peter Mays, who runs that gallery, scrambled at the last minute to see if there was some way to save the show. Said, maybe we can do it without a reception. Maybe we could do it with rolling receptions. Maybe we could do it a little bit. Maybe you can keep the gallery. He really tried to keep the gallery open, but finally the ruling came down that it had to be closed anyway. So at least my work is not locked up in there. We just never even installed it. He
yeah,
says it's not canceled, it's postponed.
yeah.
But when, who knows? And my idea of my work has changed. In a way, I don't want to be Pollyannish about this, but the exhibit I would have put up in March might be really different from the exhibit I will put up in sometime in 2021, because my thinking has grown and my work has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say too, I think the work that you've been doing, I think all of your work, but especially the work that you've been doing recently, made a very graceful transition into being about new stuff as the world changed. And it was cool because I've been going through those pieces and then going back through them, and it was like, oh no, there's like a lot more new, different meaning stuff going on here.
Thank you,
And
Sam.
yeah.
I'm finding that when it's unintentional and when it is intentional. The unintentional is clearly something I did years before this happened. So obviously, no, I'm not clairvoyant, knowing that this piece would speak to this moment. But when you look, I think it happened to all of us, and you look back at your old work, and it feels different, framed by our current experience. And I think this is true no matter what anybody does. For me, in my current work, it's really specifically relevant, because at first, when the pandemic started, I thought, well, who cares about the refugee crisis now? It's no longer the issue du jour, or even something anybody cares about, because people are saying, well, I'm worried about me and my health and my home, and I don't care about those people over in Syria, wherever they are, or on the Mexican border. They're not me. And so I thought, wow, there's going to be a blast of ice over my show. And I realized, that's not true for two reasons. One is that as we value the shelters that we do have and our homes that we do have, it makes us hopefully more sensitive to those who don't have a shelter. Really still struggling, looming as even more serious for them because there's no health care. So that's one piece of it. The other is that as I do shelter, it gives me an emotional hit for, wow, yeah, I'm doing migrants in camps, but don't we all feel like we have been on a strange journey and we are on a strange shore in a place that we are trying to make our home, envision newly. And so it's actually interesting to me that it's not at all irrelevant, but that the relevance has changed.
And on that note, let's go ahead and bring up some images and we can talk more in depth and specifically. The first image that I wanted to share is an installation shot from Sanctuary One, when this was the first time that you've shown it at Tag Gallery, and we were just installing the show. What were you thinking about, during installation, as we presented Sanctuary One here? And what is Sanctuary One about? There's three parts to it. Kind of tell us about that.
There are three parts. Sanctuary One, the first one I made, and it's travel by land. This started and became individual, more than life-size figures walking. And as it evolved, it became increasingly three-dimensional in the sense that I was using these used coffee bean bags that I had been given as their baggage, as what there is that they have to take from the old world to the new, but also as a burden. And as a theme that it's a commodity, which is how these people are treated. Putting it up was fascinating because it had never been installed altogether, because I did these as separate panels. And it was Kristine's idea to make the pattern that you see there on screen, where it sort of almost has a pyramid shape as the figures go to the larger and then smaller. On the ground over here on the floor are the sideways pieces, the horizontal pieces of children trapped in ropes that I made. So this was my first foray into sanctuary, first of 3 parts. And I still like it. When I do all 3 together, it's still going to show, but it becomes only the earliest incarnation of travel, because truthfully, not everybody walks to sanctuary, although metaphorically, we are all walking to sanctuary.
Very true, very true. Here's a photo, an image of the opening reception.
Well, what I liked about the reception was the chain link fence and how that worked, where people were in front and in back of the fence, but also you had to walk behind the fence to see the characters on that wall, which meant hopefully you got the feeling of what it is like to be behind a border fence or to be trapped. So I found that this rented fence was an essential part of the exhibit. It's an essential part of the meaning. And it also helped me bring it from a wall hanging to an installation.
Mm. Mm.
Definitely. See, and I have a couple more kind of images of what it felt like.
Yeah, you see the fence there and how it felt like to be in front and back. And I found that people were talking through the fence and grabbing onto the fence a lot. They were really engaging with that fence. And yes, it was part of the expression.
Definitely. And I like this picture because you can see the 3-dimensionality of your work too. What besides the coffee bags, what were the other materials that you used?
I have rusted wires on that one that you see, to the, I guess, right bottom.
I'd point at it, but
yeah, but also, there's the rusted wires. I use that in a few of them, a lot of rope, but also there are elements where the 2-dimensional drawing becomes 3-dimensional, especially in the hands. So there's a woman there in the more or less front who's got a hand out holding a cell phone. And that's something I saw in travels, especially Africa, but everywhere in the world. People who don't have anything have a phone.
Yeah.
It's sort of fascinating. And so I gave her a phone, and the feet are also 3-dimensional. So there's a transition from 2 to 3-dimensional work in part 1. Later, the works become more fully 3-dimensional.
Yeah.
Are there particular places that you've been that you're like consciously pulling from making these pieces?
Not really, nor do I want to say this is about any one place. I really think of the immigrant issue as global. It really is global. I mean, places I've never been, such as India, for example, have people fleeing the flooding. I know from photos and journalism how much is going on with refugees from the Middle East, Syria especially, and how awful that is because of my involvement, a little involvement with UNICEF that I raised money for with this sale of catalogs on this exhibit. So there are other places I have been, but I don't want to say that one place influenced it, because I don't want to limit it that way. I really think of this as a global phenomenon.
I remember when you were working on this, the caravan that was coming up from South and Central America through Mexico was taking place. So that was, in the news and made this even more relevant.
Absolutely. The so-called caravan, which is not a word, which was a word politically put on people who never thought they were in a caravan.
Yeah.
But those people were on foot. And also part of it is that that's where children were also trapped in cages. And so that became part of this series that was absolutely a response to a very immediate crisis. These people come from everywhere.
I think that's, sorry, it's, you were talking to about like the cell phone in the woman's hand and how that's a thing that you've seen. And I have also seen that. And I think it is becoming a universal truth that like everyone has a cell phone. You might not have shelter or a place that you can stay for more than a few days at a time, but you do have a cell phone. And I think it is a thing that like, I feel when I look through all of these is like, oh, there are these things that right now we would all boil down to in this situation. Right. And it's like the way that you have like, it's a couple of bags, a cell phone, right. And those things that are like still universal when you get down to this level of like, I need to take just what I need and can carry.
And I think many of us are coming to that as we are confined to our homes. I mean, what things actually that I thought mattered so much, what really does matter. With these people, I think it does speak to what matters. There's a piece that you can't really see here that's called All That Matters. And it's a woman who's got heavy bags on her back and she's holding a child by her hand. And that's really all that ultimately matters. It's this one. I'm pointing at the screen. You can't see me pointing at the screen. But it's,
It may be, no, I don't
that
think
one there. Yeah. You can feel the weight of those bags on her back, but you also know that if she had to give up something, she'd give up all of them in order to just hold the child's hands and walk out of there. And some of these characters have even less than that. Some of them have virtually nothing.
Yeah, just looking like at this image here, I mean, it just, you can see the man holding his child and just that anguished feeling. I mean, your work, it's emotional, it's psychological, it's definitely grabs at your heart. And then even in the foreground with all of those shoes, those little girls' shoes, these are real people. And
well, one important thing about the shoes is the echo that it has, not only with this time in this exhibit, but it's back to the Holocaust with the shoes left behind, and for that matter, the Underground Railroad. Anytime that people have to flee, you leave behind anything you don't absolutely have to have, or if people die, what's left are their shoes.
Yeah.
I also like that there's a pair of little girl shoes way on top. They're pretty, they're pink, they have a flower on them. And you get the idea that maybe somebody dressed up to go to the new place because this was going to be hopeful.
Yeah, definitely. A couple more installation shots here. I mean, just seeing the work through the fence, it's very powerful and profound.
Yeah.
I think there's something that we've already alluded to already about the evolution of the work itself, like this whole thing where you started kind of panel by panel and you had this idea of it being global. You don't want it to be about any one specific place. And then you find the fence, and that shifts the way that you're thinking. And then we see people interacting with the fence, and that shifts the way that you're thinking. And we talked about how this pandemic now is just shifting our current lens. I just think I'm getting this feeling right now where I'm really kind of excited to see how you continue this project and how you eventually end up exhibiting the whole thing, because I think you've been shifting the work already, and maybe you didn't realize how much you were, and now you're more conscious of that.
Oh yeah, I'm already thinking of the layout of the whole thing. I mean, I'm so there. This was an idea of how it might have been exhibited. I never actually did this. This was just a mock-up using photos. But it had occurred to me to walk around these rather than have them wrap around the outside and the inside. Because that would give even more of a sense of the fencing. This was never actually installed. The closest is what I was going to do at Gallery 825, where I was going to have a smaller room, the Werdeman room, where you would have felt more surrounded by the figures rather than having them linear on a wall. That was the postponed show.
I feel like too a cool thing about this and that setup would, I feel like in here you could have that sense of claustrophobia that you get when there are masses of people moving in this way, right? And the camps that get set up and all of that. And yeah, I really like that.
Yeah. I may install, I can install these things at different times in different ways, and maybe even incorporate some of part 1, part 2, and part 3 in different shows. I hope that there is a longevity here so that there'll be different ways to put these pieces together someday.
I think it definitely is that.
Yeah, for sure. And then this was from, I think, our last studio visit with you. You are working on the rafts, or you were working on the rafts.
Yeah, the rafts are finished now, and those are dead bodies. They're on my work table. They drowned, I'm sorry to say, and but I realized that there was a certain amount from the very beginning. There was a certain amount of, yes, we're going to do it. We're hopeful. We're going to make it, and that continues through many of the rafts. And towards the end of doing it, I thought, that's a lie. Not everybody makes it. And actually, I read about, not just on the Rio Grande, but in the Mediterranean, a lot of people don't make it and are drowned, and it's not fair to the experience to make it seem as if it's all happy and positive and heroic, because it's not. And so these are bodies that I created. It's just my work table there, and what you're seeing on the table next to it is an example of a scale model where I was started laying out the rafts. So this is work in progress.
Yeah, I mean, and of course it always changes. I don't know, this may have been from a previous studio visit right before that, but I mean, this is only one half of the background also.
Yeah, this is half of a 36-foot panel, which has since developed further, not just because it finished, but I made this better. So this is 36 feet that when I put up the part 2, which is the rafts, this will completely cover that back wall, which is the same wall where those people were walking in the previous shot. It's scheduled to go up in July. I don't know if it's going to go up in July or not, maybe August, maybe September. Anyway, this was fun to do because I haven't painted in a while. And this was something that I was able to get back to painting, which was really a good feeling.
That's great. I think I have a couple more images of some of the rafts too.
Oh, this is one of the figures on one of the rafts. It's a large raft. It's a double mast, but these 3 people are at the back of the raft, and the detail I like best about it, I don't know how visible it is here, is that the mom is holding the baby's foot.
Yeah.
I just thought that was really sweet. And in all of these rafts, there's 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional. You also see the shadow image of a cross there. And it's accidentally in one sense because that's how I'm holding up the fabric on the vertical mast, but it also does have that message that these people may well have believed that they were looked over by faith. It also calls into question how much has their faith helped them as they set sail on these seas and did or didn't make it. So there's going to be a subtle impact on as these rafts line up on the floor, and there's a lot of them, of these cross-looking masts behind all the figures.
What are the hands and feet made out of?
They're clay.
Oh, okay. Okay.
They're clay on a substructure, which isn't the same for all of them, depending on what I could get in the size. I have a picture of what's in the arms that I'm going to put on my next blog. I don't have a picture of it here because I use very, very simple materials throughout all of this because I think it's fitting. A lot of natural materials, found wood. This burlap fabric is the worst, you know, unintentionally raw linen, just charcoal. In some of them I have bark on the bottom that's from that's from the same, that's the front of the same piece that the other one was on. Yeah, that's a clay. This hand, the lower hand is clay, the upper hand is drawn. So there's both 2- and 3-dimensional, and they ought to ideally flow smoothly. And she's just glued. She's just on raw linen canvas, glued onto that burlap background with more of these burlap bags on her. And she's holding all of them. To do this, I needed to. I'm reaching forward to point at a screen, and you can't see what I had to actually take a real piece of twine, which is on the bag, and cut into the canvas to wind it around the drawn fingers.
Okay.
So 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional, it's making a kind of statement about what is real and what is illusion. And that's something that is in all of my work. The hand that's out is, here's the one of the, the hand on the foot from the previous piece. Yeah. And once again, it's all pretty rough, but I want it that way. There's not a lot of, and here's the whole piece of the front and the back of this one with the double mast. This one is called Almost There because this woman in the front is disembarking. And so she actually got there. Notice that there's bark between those burlap and twine rolls. And that's real tree bark from local trees. Most of the stuff that I have here is found, glued, cheap. I don't want fancy on this. I've done stuff in the past that's used plexiglass, used metal, used other fancy things, and there's none of that in this series.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Pam.
I just want to ask you, because you use a lot of burlap and you've used it across 1 and 2, and I find when I spend a lot of time with one material, I develop a relationship with it. And I think the word you used for the burlap was nasty. And I was wondering if you would expand just a little bit on how you and burlap are getting on these kids. Yeah.
It's cheap crap. I mean, in the first series, they were all the used coffee bean bags, and they were actually bags. They were the real bags. It was donated to me by another artist, and I had to take them apart. I had to cut them up and take them apart. And some of them had coffee beans still in them. Mm-hmm. A couple of raw coffee beans still in them, and they smelled of coffee beans. I kind of ran out of most of those, and so I went to Amazon. and just looked for burlap, and whatever was the loosest and cheapest kind, I bought that. I have now sourced more used coffee bean bags, and they will reappear in the third part.
This is another powerful raft.
Yeah, this is simple. It's called bulrushes, and these grasses are completely local, just stolen off of lots in the neighborhood, and in one case stolen from somebody's lawn, but and they didn't miss it. But these particular tall grasses are actually the same general kind that grows along the Nile, and they're biblical. They're exactly the kinds of grasses that are referred to in the Tale of Moses with the raft of bulrushes. And so this is heavily symbolic. It's symbolic anyway because they're the abandoned little tiny shoes. And you can ask what the story was, whether the child made it and just the shoes are left behind, or if the child didn't make it. But the sense is that Moses was, in a way, in the biblical tale in the Old Testament, kind of a refugee. Not really. His mother put him on the raft and hoped he'd be rescued and so forth. But he was a kind of an early refugee on a raft. And I wanted to echo that without being literal. I mean, there's not a photo of Moses over here. But the bulrushes in between these logs are very intentional. Plus, I love the grasses. I've used the grasses in an earlier series. Actually, I've used a lot of, pieces from nature, such as pine fronds from the palm trees. The challenge for an artist using these natural things is how they're not going to disintegrate. And they are glued within an inch of their life. I mean, they're just spray glued and varnished and everything. They are still not archival. Eventually, I mean, they're grass. They will eventually disappear, but they're as preserved as they can be.
That's the ephemerality of art, of the subject matter.
Yeah.
Things change. So definitely.
They live in photos.
Yeah.
Oh, here's another one from one of the last rafts where I was no longer just having happy sailing people. And this little girl is in the water and the mom is leaning over to get her out of the water. You see the bark again. It's just a photo on my floor with sheets there. It'll be better on a gallery floor. But yeah, this is a large raft with many characters on them, mostly concentrating on pulling people from the sea. And with all of them, I start with drawing. I start with drawing the faces and then build the rest from it.
And did you have models, or where do the faces and the figures come from? Just your imagination?
And make them up.
Yeah.
I don't have live models. I don't have photos. I sometimes have a reference to the action. I will have actually often have an action that I'll use. This happens to be photographed on my lawn. Kristine took this picture. This one is a prayer for safe passage. And I draped that piece of burlap coffee bean bag around her as if it's a shawl. And the hands are once again three-dimensional. And this is coffee bean bags on the logs on the bottom too. So that's one of the full-scale rafts.
This one also reminds me of the Madonna with the drape.
Yeah, there's echoes between, I hope there continues to be echoes between all three parts of the series, and she's part of that. Oh gosh. Yeah, I took them out on the lawn. There's a flag there.
I love it because you can
They
see
don't actually sail on the lawn. Say what?
You can see the size of the rafts.
Oh, yeah.
You get a good sense of scale.
Yeah. standing there smiling.
I also think, like I've said before, that I would love to see these like floating in a pond or on water.
Yeah,
Something
the
to
only thing
think
is
about.
they would disintegrate.
I know. Maybe figuring it out somehow. Maybe at the end of the exhibition of the project.
Yeah, drown them all.
Yeah. Here's another detail.
That's another
Or a
early one.
giraffe.
Yeah.
And then you're starting
Oh,
shelters.
this is the very first piece in my brand new series, which is not brand new series, brand new part, which is the shelter part. So the very first one I've done, and I'm going to continue experimenting with this. I wanted to put painted canvas over the top. When I finally got to it, it didn't look right, so I went back to the coffee bean bags on the top. But as we go to other ones, I may do other things. And she's got a little bit of pottery here. I don't know what I'm going to ultimately put with it. So this is actually a like a working model, because they're just on a cardboard box right now. But yeah, once again, I hope it seems that there's continuity from the very first to the last, because they're, once again, drawn charcoal. Oh, that's me putting her up on these, on the poles. And you can see this is, once again, very simple construction. It's just duct tape holding them together. There's not a lot of sophistication about this. I drew them first, then made these poles. They're the same ones that became logs in the raft series, but now they're standing this up. And once again, going from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional, where she's a drawing, but then she becomes alive, really, as she holds up this shelter.
Yeah, very powerful. I think that's the last image.
Oh, okay.
So,
There's also like a really interesting thing too, though, in that, like, and I know they won't float or stay up very long, but part of the making and you're going through the process of like, how do I make something out of these cheap materials and these found objects that will, in this case, like stand for a raft rather than like carry me across the ocean.
Oh,
they're
metaphors. They're absolutely just symbolic. I don't intend that anybody would think that some refugee gets on a raft like this and traverses the Mediterranean or anything else. Nobody does. But symbolically, we are each on our own lifeboats. And certainly, even if the real rafts that actual people go on are very crowded, they're not tiny like this. They're piled with people, which is one reason they capsize. Each of us in our own lives are by ourselves, or by ourselves with maybe one or two or a few people that we care about. And that's why it's not a matter of like Ai Weiwei, how do you say his name? Ai Weiwei. He has a wonderful refugee raft that gets in Switzerland or Germany or something right now, and they're all sort of silhouettes, and that has its own impact. But we are not all faceless characters and silhouettes. We are each figures that are like. I mean, every single face is really specific. Some of them are specific to an ethnicity, and some, it's not a question of the ethnicity. They are just that person.
You know what's interesting? I saw that Ai Weiwei piece. It was at the Marciano Gallery.
I guess it was, that's right, yeah.
A little bit. And I didn't think about it until you were just saying that. But I remember seeing the piece and thinking, like, it feels like a large representation of the political issue.
Mhm.
And you could look at it like that. And I think a bunch of the faces are from the Chinese zodiac. And I think it's the issue that your pieces are talking about is the same thing, but I feel like in your pieces where I'm drawn is those particular faces, and it doesn't feel like a representation of a political issue. It feels like a representation of personal issues. Does that make sense?
I think that's what gets to people. I think that there are only so many statistics of numbers of people dead or numbers of anything that finally hits us emotionally. To hit us emotionally, it's the particularity, not the generality. And so if these people are, it's the macrocosm from the microcosm, not the other way around. In other words, this is one woman holding up one tent in one way with one pair of hands, and so we can root for her. 1,000 women over a landscape also makes a statement, but it's not the statement I'm making right now, because I really want you to say, go girl, you can do it, rather than, hey, everybody, this is an issue and we need to donate. It's because it's not that.
Yeah.
I read an article in the New York Times yesterday, written by a doctor about her experience. And the whole time I was reading it, I thought it was from a male doctor. And then I get to the end and I'm like, oh my God, this is a female doctor. And, I don't know why that struck me, or I don't know. There was just something about that. But she talked about she over a month's time from the time it started and then to just a couple days before the article came out. And she mentioned several personal stories, about people that she met that, one day they came in, it was an older gentleman. He was, his pulse ox was 80, which is low. But he's like, I'm okay, I'm breathing fine, go check your other patients, and the next day he had passed away. And so there were a lot of stories, very personal stories. And it just that's what grabs us. I mean, because a lot of times, in the news, we don't hear these personal stories. And so, kind of like what you and Sam were just saying, all of this whole sanctuary, it is about these stories. It's about seeing these, families, seeing the mothers and child, and, putting these personal aspects to it, which make it relatable for everybody that's looking at it, that's watching what's taking place.
Yeah. To me, political action is always personal action. It's not that I'm against big political action. I mean, I intend to do what I can, but if you want to get to somebody, it has to be through somebody.
Yeah.
Not through everybody.
Definitely. Well, I mean, this has been amazing, Pam. Thank you so much for going through the images, for talking with us. I know your catalog is still available for anybody that would like to purchase it, with a part of the proceeds going to UNICEF. So always a good, charity, a good donation. And yeah, I mean, we definitely look forward to seeing the exhibitions in person when that's possible, and especially all together.
Can I just say that I do have a promise that all three parts will be all together in early, probably February 2021 at Tag Galleries. It looks like all goes well. I'll put all three together. It's going to be quite a stunning show.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.